Okay, and boom. According to that, I'm live. Oh, it's kind of dark in here. I'm going to turn on some lights. Give me a moment. Oh, so I got some new OBS templates. Let me turn those on. Not that in the background. Hey, so my name is Hiko Simon. This is Tokyo Tonight. Yes, I was getting some help with some new OBS templates to make this all look nicer, which I used, but then all of a sudden everything just sort of crashed and wouldn't work, and it got, so then I had to go back to the old setup, and the old setup wasn't working, so I had to set that up all over again, so it was more technical features than usual. Still, I made it. Glad that some people already rocked in here again. Sorry for the fuss waiting for that. Let me just adjust this. So we've got two concurrent viewers, which I think I lost someone with the late setup, which I apologize for. It's more than 10 minutes late. Good to see you, Ben Duncan, John Carlo Lanoy, and Cobras Tenchi. I know that Cobras Tenchi in particular, middle of the night, so I do appreciate you joining as always, and anyone else who can make it in. Yeah, it's been an interesting week. I've had a crazy busy week, so I kind of was going through the news last night and saw that Kishida, there's like what looks like an assassination attempt on Kishida. Which when you think about, of course, just recently we just had, not so long since the Abe assassination. So kind of crazy this could happen again. I'm still processing myself what's out there in terms of news about it. There's not a ton of information, so I can share what I know. I guess it's one of those things where I must admit, when I get busy with work, whatever, when you're in Japan, you still are picking everything up, whereas here I really am reading through the news feed, so I can share my view. But yeah, I feel a bit out of touch on that anyway. So yeah, John Carlo Illinois, good to see you. Good to see everybody rocking in. Do remember to say hello if you're in there, particularly share where you're from if you're a new commenter. I think I saw earlier, yeah, Darren Schmee. Good to see you, Darren Schmee. Yeah, the new setup buggy. It happens anyway. But yeah, I do appreciate the person who's giving me help on that, and I'm hoping to get this looking a little bit better. It was actually kind of nice. It has like a little clock in the top showing what the time is here and in Tokyo, which is a nice feature, but like I said, everything just crashed at the last minute. That's life. That is what it is. But yeah, as usual, if you've got something you want me to talk about, a request, a question, just a hello, whatever, say my name. It will flash orange. You'll get to see that. You'll also yeah, remember to like if you like. I do appreciate that. That's pretty much all that I'm doing this for. I've got all the monetization and everything turned off, so yeah. Anyway, I hope that everyone is well. I've had an interesting day here today, or actually this weekend. I just, some people saw on Twitter, some people saw I shared a photo of myself with the Tesla that I got from Turo, which is like an Airbnb for cars. It's like a car sharing, car rental sort of a service. And yeah, it was fun. Because I took myself a photo with the car, people said, oh, geez, are you living in America permanently? But no, it was just a rental for the weekend. But it was funny. It was my first time driving an electric car, I think. And yeah, it was a bit of an experience. Also using Turo as well, which again, in America is pretty popular. People lend out their car to other people like as a rental car and so on. It's a good setup. I have a few complaints, not so much with the people. The people who I dealt with were excellent. The car was excellent. It was awesome. I was looking at the bill and it was like, they advertise it's going to be $80 a day or $85 a day or whatever. And so, sure, $170, that makes sense. And then they say $120 to come deliver it off and pick it up from where you are. And I appreciate the convenience and saves me having to get around on a bus or a taxi to go pick up the car. So that's okay. And then you got tax. Of course, they don't include tax on anything here. In Japan, they include tax and prices. And it's really nice to have that. So when they say what it costs, it's actually what it costs. So you add another amount for that. And, you still expect, okay, so 170, 120 for the drop-off, taxes, whatever. So, you sort of expected all that up to about, just under 400 or whatever. And I got charged like 570. I was trying to figure out what it was. And it turns out that the app charges a randomly allocated risk-related fee that's a percentage of your of how much you're paying for the car, which they said for me was 100%. So I ended up paying like double. And even a double, for a good car, which it was, I suppose you could pay for a day for $170. Still not that bad. It's, I think you'd pay that much at some rental places. But I'm trying to figure out, okay, if that's, one, I'm going to pay attention to that fee. And while it's nice I can pick the car that I want, I might just go rental from now on. But it was pretty cool. It was still a good experience. The car itself, just for anyone, I feel like in America, everybody drives electric cars all the time now, or you see them all over the place. I have in Japan, you don't, they're kind of still special to see. For what it's worth, I found it. Yeah, I'm high risk. Danger is my middle name. Maybe that's right. Thomas Morris. Perhaps Elon saw my Twitter account and said I have to pay 100% on everything. Although that said, this was Turo, so I don't think he's got anything to do with that. But yeah, what was cool about it was, I mean, apart from the fact it's so simple, like the interior is so bare bones, everything's just done through the sort of tablet. But yeah, it's not like sporty handling. It's not a Ferrari or a Porsche, but it's straight line speed. Like when you get on the highway and you want to pull into traffic and pull ahead of traffic on the highway, or if you want to overtake somebody, or if you're at traffic lights and you just feel like having some fun, just the fact that you put the floor down, and it literally feels like you're being catapulted. I involuntarily just shouted far, the first time I tried accelerating, and you only have to do that for a few seconds. You're instantly going from up to an illegal number of miles an hour, and it's kind of funny. As soon as you hit the limit, which is about 100 miles an hour, not that I'm saying I did or didn't hit that, the car immediately stops accelerating at that speed. Like it can only go up to a certain point, and then it just stays there. So you almost sort of fall forward when you hit the top speed. But it was really good fun. Anyway, it's a good way to travel around. So I think I'm going to rent some more electric cars. I was into that. So yeah, I'm enjoying America. Anyway, got to see some more stuff on the weekend. Apparently there is a completely German, I don't know if Kerberos Tenchi would validate this, but there's a town called Leavenworth, which is like east of Seattle, and it's like, it's basically a Bavarian town. And I mean, when I say Bavarian town, it's not like a little theme park. It's like the whole large town with many, many people is completely like a Bavarian film set, with like mountains and everything, and beer halls everywhere. Yeah, that was kind of crazy. Like, I wish I'd been able to spend more time there. And if you spend there overnight, I guess I could have enjoyed some of the actual beer there. But yeah, that was pretty cool. So anyway, I'm still digging getting to see around Seattle and whatnot. But yeah, that was the end to a very, very busy week that I've had. And I've got another busy week ahead, but I'm hopefully going to get to enjoy some more time. I'm already 2 months in. And 3 months to go. So yeah, Thomas Morris, because Elon might announce that he bought YouTube tomorrow. Oh God, please be joking about that. Well, you know what? Yeah. Even as a scenario, would I want to buy YouTube? Are you kidding? I mean, I think the best scenario is that you're in a position to give advice to YouTube and they listen to you. But to actually own and be responsible for running YouTube, I think that would suck. I mean, as much as owning Twitter no doubt does for Elon. So no, not going to do that. But yes, I guess they saw danger as my middle name and they priced me for it. So that was a mistake. But what can we do? So yeah, other than that, I'm going to jump to the topic. It's still winter here. I don't get it. Like I really thought that here would be like Japan, it'd go through gradual seasons, and everyone would say, no, America, or at least Seattle, doesn't become, it stays winter until July. And I thought they were exaggerating, but I'm learning that they're not. It's still as cold now as it was in the start of February when I got here, and it's kind of stayed the same. But yeah, Elon bought all the butter in Japan. Ben, you're just trolling me now. You're just trying to trigger me on purpose. So anyway, peaceful thoughts. Let's go in. Again, I've talked a few times about using ChatGPT. It's getting interesting now to the extent that there's kind of, two interesting news stories. One from the start of the week, which where you might have heard that ChatGPT is getting into some trouble with regulators in Europe, and particularly in Italy, it was temporarily banned. The reason it was banned is it's not that Europeans are necessarily, perhaps you can say they are afraid of American technology and trying to be protectionist and so on, and trying to hold their people back from the future. That's probably all partly true, but what they specifically regulated them over was, you have to realize that when you use AI services generally, unless they tell you otherwise, whatever you put into the AI service, you say, look at my code and tell me, how to fix it, and write a letter to my mum for me, and you want to put in your mum's name or whatever. Anything you put in is not only being saved, like ChatGPT, for example, these AI services, they're not just robots. They're not just, everyone thinks they're like a magic, like Wizard of Oz algorithm. And they are like the Wizard of Oz in the sense that there is an old man like with puppet strings behind it. All of the stuff on ChatGPT and these other AI services to differing degrees is human accessible. They go and they check. If they find out that, it went and said something pro-Nazi or something like that, people intervene and go in and manually try to adjust it so it doesn't do that anymore. And, the reason it's so good is because there's been so much human intervention, checking the conversations and so on, which is a concern for companies where if you're putting in, if you're trying to write like a secret, like a summary of a secret new feature for your company, or if you're sharing, personal information as an input, and you assume this is just going into a machine, well, most of the time it is, but it's possible that there are people who are looking at that and who can access that. And in fact, for all we know, because OpenAI doesn't say, it could be actively harvesting and reviewing, is there useful information about competitors or other companies in this data. And because of this is why companies have these rules coming out about don't put confidential information in, or don't use this at work, because we're worried you'll put work stuff into this. And from the European perspective, just the same as Japan, if you collect and use personal information, you have to get consent to do that first. You have to put a click screen, and it's why you have to have all these cookies and so on, messages for European websites. And Japan has similar laws, really strict privacy laws that say if you're going to hold on to or store or process personal information, you have to tell people that you're doing that and let people opt out of you storing that information. And clearly, ChatGPT just doesn't, one, it doesn't notify people. It doesn't actively tell you what it's doing with data that goes into it. And two, there's no way for you to opt out of doing that other than not using the service. But if you're not being told in the first place, you don't know. That's the problem that the Italians had. And as soon as people realize it's a problem in Italy, if it's a problem in Italy, it's a problem everywhere in Europe. And so, all of a sudden, okay, this should work. Let's see. Can you see me? Coming back. Boom. There we are. Okay, that was OBS crashing. So, yeah, OBS is not very stable right now. Anyway, at least I was able to fix it. So, wherever I got up to, I was explaining how, I think I've explained this before. I'm back. Slake Manson, good to see you. Basically, the more data you feed into your AI, the smarter it's going to get, very simply. There are different AI training models that are more efficient with less data, but essentially, even with those models, whichever you've got the more data for is smarter. And basically, Japanese is a single country, single language, and while there's a ton of material on the internet in Japanese, compared to the volume of information on the internet in English, it dwarfs, which means that, just Japanese AI tools are just inherently not as smart. You have this huge problem. And so the fact that OpenAI is looking at really focusing on Japan is great for Japan. Partly because Japan's kind of behind on this kind of thing, and partly because, it would actually be really good to look at what they can do to bring the Japanese standard of, AI trained data up, level with English. It's a real problem for Japan. However, what happened at the end of this week is probably some lawmakers looking at what's happening in Europe have gone and said that, the people are starting to realize in each country that privacy concerns, again, just the fact that they don't disclose, that there is, and talking here about the Italian problem that I just mentioned, that they don't disclose, they don't ask for, they don't ask for permission or disclose what they're doing with personal information. It just means that in Japan itself, it's very strict privacy laws. Now, even in Japan, they're starting to think, should we be allowing people to use AI at least as is? The solution to this is simple, by the way. It's not a matter of banning AI. It's just a matter of that these companies that do this just need to be transparent. They just need to say what they're doing. And the problem with that is that companies like ChatGPT, like OpenAI, are inherently, they keep it secret because I guess they think of it like a business secret. They don't want to share what they're doing with data. They don't want to freak people out. They want people to use the tool and not think that they're being spied on. But they are being spied on, so they should do that. So, and in Japan, I think they're going to get in trouble in Japan, which I really hope that they just figure out how easy it is to do the correct way first. Because I really think it'd be great for OpenAI to actually focus on Japan and figure out, if they can figure out some way to sort of do really high quality translations of English internet into Japanese and then train off the translated Japanese, that might be awful. You might have an AI that's, learns a kind of a interpretation of a translated into Japanese sort of Japanese, but it'd be really, really cool. So I'm really interested in seeing this get fixed. And, while all this kind of pending, oh, Europe's going to ruin it or Japan's going to ruin it. It's not that bad. It's just a matter of that these companies, as they should anyway, be transparent to people about what they're doing with their data, so that people know if it's okay. Can I put my work information into this? Can I put, sensitive personal information into this? It's not like Google search, where, you might have an embarrassing search history, where, again, I don't know. Actually, I don't know what the policy is with search history, whether Google employees are allowed to look you up and see what you've been searching, but or if they can do that. I guess they probably can, but they're supposed to tell you if they can. But AI inherently looks at your data. So yeah, you got to know that anyway. I must have Xfinity Wi-Fi, says Thomas Morris. You know what? I don't know if this is the building, but certainly the remote control I have says Xfinity on it. So I don't know if that is the Wi-Fi that I'm using, but yeah, that's entirely possible and credible. Wow, ads that I do not want to see. So apparently, so Japan is rolling out a new bicycle helmet law, which I believe is actually now already in effect as of April 1st. It says that people have a doryoku gimu. They've got an effort to make their best efforts to wear helmets. I don't know how you can. There is no try. what is that? What is the Yoda phrase? No try, do. But yeah, this is the idea. The law says try you must to wear helmets, but there's no penalties attached. So what does that mean? And a lot of people, very, very helpful amateur Supreme Court justices on the internet have declared that, if they're not going to make you do it, then it's not a law and you don't have to do it, and I'm not going to do it, which isn't exactly how it works. It looks like Sora News decided to ask F-Sum, who I guess if he was into making munitions, he would be dropping F-bombs. F-Sum, the lawyer, what kind of lawyer do they get, I wonder? There's no penalty and it is up to people's discretion. But I think this is actually a good thing in Japan. So people say, oh, Japan passed a stupid law that's not a law. What they're trying to do is, you know how, like, in New Zealand and Australia, for example, when they had these lockdowns for COVID, they basically immediately from day one had police going around and started digging people for fines and arresting them and punishing them to set an example to get everyone to change their behavior. They try to use the law to make people change behavior. In Japan, they kind of do the same thing, but what they do with all of these laws, it's the same with the smoking laws when they rolled them out and so on, is they first roll them out kind of where they'll do these campaigns where they have people go out in the street and remind people, hey, it's the law, you got to wear a helmet. If they see someone without a helmet, they'll basically just annoy them and remind them into compliance, and they'll wait until it's already an established norm that everyone's doing it, and then they'll attach penalties. They don't want to attach penalties when when the majority of people are not doing it. I guess the LDP is worried that they might actually lose an election sometime. So yeah, they don't want to actually criminalize people doing what they think is normal stuff, but they're using the law to create a framework where they can just adjust it once it's accepted and normal to doing it. So yeah, you can't get arrested or penalized for it, but you might get stopped by the police or other people. There might be traffic wardens or whatever who will remind you about it. And the idea is they're going to keep slowly turning up pressure until, making sure everyone's in compliance. And then once, you get 90% compliance, then they probably will enforce it. The point being that, sure, so you can party you can be, I'm the 10%, I'm not going to, I'm not going to do what you told me kind of a person. But the idea is that they want people to start following the rules. And I see people, again, I don't think it's just virtual signaling. Yeah, it makes sense. There are so many. Again, it's kind of proven the difference in outcomes when people end up in tangles with cars. Even if it's the bicycle's fault, doesn't matter. Or if it's the driver's fault, even if the bicyclist isn't at fault, they always come off second best, right? Or, regardless of whose blame it is, you don't want anyone to die. So, yeah, I think that's right. Well, I think there will continue to be plenty of people who ignore this. And the fact that you can ride on the footpath in Japan in most places, and that's kind of encouraged. In fact, I've even heard of people who have been told by traffic police, please ride on the footpath, it's dangerous on the road. And, the reason for that, and the reason that you do that is you look at the sort of bicycle that this person's on. They're not road bikes. Again, because you're not allowed to ride on the footpaths and because it's so dangerous going on the roads with cars in a lot of countries, like where I'm from, then, yeah, it's basically, unless you're riding like Tour de France, same speed as cars, covered in lycra and spandex and wearing a helmet, you might as well not even be on the road. It's kind of nice in Japan that you can be on the road with kids on the footpath, carrying, an umbrella and shopping, and looking at your mobile phone all at the same time. I mean, it's nice in the sense that, that wouldn't be an option normally on roads. And because of that, people aren't wearing helmets. But yeah, I think there are enough accidents where people die needlessly, which could be prevented by helmets. So I think it's the right move, and I think it's the right approach. I do like Japan, that it's not immediately straight to baseball bats in terms of penalties for these sorts of things. And I think it's kind of dickish to take advantage of that and say, well, in that case, I'm just going to pretend like it doesn't exist. No, the idea is, in your time, you're not getting penalized from day one, but you should, go start maybe shopping for some helmets. And I think that's a smart thing to do. I actually got a helmet here because I was nervous myself. I loved riding the e-cycles. But they say in Seattle as well, they actually took away the penalties for not wearing helmets, but they recommend that you wear them here in Seattle. And so I bought one. And I was thinking, am I going to throw it away when I get back? But when I guess now that there's a use for it back in Japan, I'll probably send it back over to Japan with me when I get back. So yeah. Checking out the comments. Rainbow, good to see you, Rainbow. Oi, indeed. Sachifu says butter. Thank you for saying butter. The solution is butter. Butter makes everything better. Good to see you, Sachifu. Yeah, by the way, I probably need some more help with the OBS templates. I had some struggles at the start of the stream. Dan H, I'm still only halfway through the Carlos Ghosn interview on Saturday after dinner. But I'm enjoying it. And I must admit, it's kind of funny. As much as I've shared multiple times, and I remain, and it's funny, even the interviewers were asking some tough questions of Ghosn, and I'm not really entirely sympathetic to him. It does change your perspective when you hear someone make their case for 2 hours in a casual conversation. And it still remains funny to watch the conversation, just how they all switch between, French and Arabic and English. It's cool. It's good. It's just hard to get the time to watch 2 hours focused on subtitles. I can listen if I go for a run. I can listen to stuff, but when it's all Arabic, it's different. It's kind of cool, Dan H. I must admit, of course, I've only seen you ever chatting in English, but the Lebanese Arabic sounds really cool, and it's cool if you can understand and follow that in that language. I think that's awesome. So yeah, believe in yourself. Great to see you and everyone else. And back to Thomas Morris. Watch the latest 60-minute story on Google AI through their DeepMind unit. I've seen tons of. The AlphaGo documentary about DeepMind is awesome. If there's a chance, I'll see if there's a way I can watch the 60 minutes. Thank you for the recommendation, Thomas Morris. I reckon they are awesome. The guy who founded it, the British guy, former chess prodigy guy, he's really cool. His interview on Alex Friedman was really, really good as well. So, thanks, Sachi. I appreciate it. I'm sure it's mostly me that's at fault with it not working, but that was a thing anyway. So, big story of the week. I should get to this. And like I said, I'm just processing information myself at the moment. But somebody threw, basically, it's kind of funny. It was kind of, when I first saw it, it was somebody threw a smoke bomb far away from the Prime Minister. He's fine, was the first story. But then it turns out that, okay, it wasn't a smoke bomb. It was a pipe bomb. And he threw it at the Prime Minister, but it didn't go off right away. It took 30 seconds to go off. And in that 30 seconds, they moved the Prime Minister away. And now the assessment is, if it had gone off, where it landed, when it landed, as it was intended, it could have been life-threatening to the Prime Minister. Also, again, at the moment, there's nothing known about the motives or anything really about the person who was arrested, who threw the pipe bomb at the Prime Minister. Two other things that have come out so far that are sort of interesting. One, so after the Abe assassination, and they've got the G7 happening right now, so all the concerns whether Japan was up to speed on its security preparations and so on, and the big Japanese special police sort of public demonstrations that look like dance videos and so on. For all of that, they moved him away and they held the bullet shield in front of him, but it was a pipe bomb on the ground. So one, it kind of showed up that again there's big questions as to whether Japan still really has security necessary to deal with these sorts of things. Whether this guy was inspired by the guy who did by Yamakami, the person who did the the Abe assassination, well, it seems like it was a homemade pipe bomb, which Yamakami also made. And it kind of shows, in a way, that, again, even in a country with firearms controls, not that this is an argument against having proper firearms controls, but it does show, I guess, particularly in a country with a lot of nerds, that there are people who would just spend time learning how to do this. And in the end of the day, I mean, if someone wants to learn how to do this, you kind of can't, like, stop that. But that said, I mean, you should still try to stop it and regulate it. In terms of what his motives were, it does make me wonder, is this another person who hopes? I mean, my biggest fear, which I've expressed here multiple times about the Abe assassination, is that in a way, everybody seemed to kind of accept the motives of the assassin to draw attention to the abuse of followers of the Unification Church. That he pretty much got his agenda, to the extent he murdered Abe in order to draw attention to his preferred agenda. He got everything that he wanted. I mean, you would say if he was a political terrorist, he was completely successful. And I always thought that even if he was legit, if you show almost directly in reaction, like you're agreeing with what he assassinated Abe for, and vindicate him in that way, you're going to encourage the next lunatic to copy that. And I do worry. I mean, he even looks like like the guy from the Abe assassination. The next person's gonna be like NHK fees and is gonna do the same thing. In a sense, you are rewarding the terrorists. And Japan has a history of doing this. Japan's around the 1930s, when Japanese democracy, which it was a democracy in the 1930s, and it fell apart because there were a bunch of political assassinations, which basically the press and even the courts felt sympathy for the assassins and kind of gave them a free pass, which encouraged like all these rogue military units to keep doing coup attempts and assassinations, which led to Japan being sort of taken over and run by the military, and which took it into World War II. Japan has a history of being too soft on assassins and it driving Japan into disaster, and I get the feeling that's what they did with the Abe assassination. That's my personal... Again, but the thing is, we don't even know if this guy did this with an agenda or not, but that's my fear. The other thing that was interesting was, again, the first news reports show things like this. They show the person being tackled and held on the ground by police. But it turns out it wasn't the police who got him. He was standing there, and everyone was like looking around for 30 seconds confused. And the person who threw the pipe bomb, nobody was doing anything to him, and he was standing right there. It turns out, in the end of the day, like a 56-year-old fisherman who was standing nearby. This was, by the way, for local elections in Japan. Kishida was doing a stump speech in support of local politicians in a fishing area of Wakayama. I don't know if this was the famous Wakayama like whaling port or something like that. I've got no idea if this has anything to do with that. But in the end of the day, a fisherman saw the guy standing there and nobody doing anything. So this old fisherman, 56-year-old guy, went and crash tackled and held down the guy himself. The police didn't do their job, so it took a fisherman to do it, to catch an assassin who was just standing there. So again, it really does call into question once again, unfortunately, the preparedness and competence of security for officials in Japan. And again, I think I said after the Abe thing, I think it's a nice thing about Japan that it's a country where the prime minister can just stand in front of your train station and talk, and people can sort of see them and listen to them. For all the flaws in Japanese democracy and politics, the fact that it's a safe country where people can sort of campaign like that. And everyone was saying, is this the end of regular public stump speeches and campaigning and accessibility to politicians? And everyone kind of came around and said, well, no, it's not. That was a one-off case. But now it's happened again. And it feels like a copycat. We'll find out whether it was or not. The suspect, for what it's worth, is in custody and is saying that he won't speak to police without his lawyer, the police are saying. That's kind of funny. Like, the Japanese generally don't give a crap if someone has a lawyer or not. And, and they make up pretty much what they're saying half the time as well. So it's kind of, again, that gives an impression to me like the police are also kind of at a loss for what to do as well. As much as, again, I want to understand what the hell happened with this, both on the security side and what the assassin was doing. But I don't want this to be another case. I really don't think, even if they're right, you don't want to validate them or vindicate them by treating them like they were right after and encouraging the next person. So even if like he's for climate change or something, even if it's something I agree with, I mean, don't, even if you act in support of what the person is doing, don't do it so obviously in connection with an attempted assassination, because you're setting a bad precedent. We'll see what happens. So I'm worried about all sorts of things with this. I mean, look, I should have said in the very beginning, I'm not a fan of Kishida, but thank heavens, I mean, nothing happened to him. I mean, you don't want to be in any sort of a country that has political violence. And given, I mean, again, who knows what kind of, if this is political violence, what this even is about. It is a relatively, for the size and influence of Japan, it's such a peaceful, relatively peaceful country. So yeah. Anyway, into the comments. DMs. He wants a new recipe that involves natto. Every time I DM, oh yes, that's yeah, Thomas Morris, that's definitely the case. Dan H. How bad does all these attempts on PMs in Japan make the security and Naicho look bad? Yeah, agree. And well, again, I guess for a long time they've had nothing to do, but the whole idea is they've got to be prepared for this, and this looks bad, especially around the G7. You've got to wonder how people feel about Japanese security details around this. Again, not thinking that anyone should have any real reason to go after, but it really does show up. Not just that Japanese people attacking like foreign leaders or whatever, but just that you might get other people coming to Japan to do this because they see how lax the security is. So yeah. Thomas Morris, you see an LDP connection, same as GOP and religious rights in the US. Yeah, kind of. Certainly, the UC were big donors, and they have a lot of, and they provide people who campaign exactly like the religious right in the US. But the fact is, and the Moonies pay money. I mean, they actually are kind of in a way part of the religious right in the US, but they're a fringe like religious cult. But they did have direct influence, sway, particularly with Abe's father and his family. So I don't think it's quite the same. I mean, I'm no fan of the religious right in the US, and I don't consider their ideology to be what should be mainstream. By the way, Tikyo-san, good to see you, Tikyo-san. I'm glad that you can make it. But this is like, in no planet is the Unification Church, anything like a sort of legitimate, religious right isn't the right phrase. They're a batshit crazy religious cult, extreme right, So, but yeah, very similar. It's certainly of the same sort of cut of the same cloth. Ben Duncan, did they hold the guy upside down like a fish after? Oh, I wish. I mean, honestly, they should have. Maybe the police should have just left him to the fishermen. I mean, or even if it was Wakayama, they might have even had whalers there. Maybe they could have harpooned him. I mean, that would have been good. Yeah, they should have done that. That would have been catch of the day. That one. But yeah, no. Again, I still want to understand this, but unfortunately, that would have been a great photo op indeed. There is a great photo, which again, it's on Twitter, and I couldn't share it onto Mastodon, but somebody took a photo. Apparently, there's a Kyoto news person who took a photo of the moment that the fishermen tackled the attacker because no one else was doing anything. I mean, they just looked terrible. TK Sam, do foreign diplomats get to have guns when they visit? Oh, foreign diplomat security. That's a good question. I mean, on the one hand, I assume the answer is no. But you know what? With the United States, you could almost bet that at least with the US, they'd probably, I mean, they're from guns and freedom land. I don't see how Japan would really push back on like US presidential security or whatever. Maybe diplomats. I mean, Rahm Emanuel, when he's riding on the Yamanote line, do I think his security detail has guns? No, I don't think that they would, actually. I don't think that the U.S. ambassador riding on the train all the time, is he surrounded by people with guns? I'd be really surprised. It's possible. Maybe he gets a Japanese special police detail for that kind of a thing, and they can carry guns. I don't know, though. I mean, I don't know the answer, but just speculating, I'd be really surprised. Maddie, at least they've stepped up their game since Abe. Well, they kind of have, but still, clearly, it was really just dumb luck that the pipe bomb didn't go off immediately, that you didn't end up with the same result. So, who knows? Anyway. You're right. When heads of states come, for example, rather than just ambassadors, do they get to bring their own security with them? I'm sure they probably negotiate with Japan, and I imagine... To me, it's unthinkable that they wouldn't, right? But I guess they would have some sort of deal with the Japanese security forces of how many people can they have, what kind of jurisdiction they can have, whether they can have guns, and maybe they do allow a couple of the foreign people to do it. But yeah, I must admit, I'd like to know the answer to that myself. If someone can Google or something, or can find the information, I'll be curious to share in the comments. It's a good question there by Sam, particularly with the G7 going on. Some other stories. Yeah, again, kind of the decline of Japan. Now, I mean, it's well and truly now the case. I mean, living here, yeah, Japan is so on the one hand cheap, but also wages are cheap. Like the whole cost of living and everything is scaled down, and it's really pricey here. And so that's drawing both Japanese to go and work overseas. Whereas, and and it says here that foreign workers are losing respect for Japan. While young people go to overseas to earn money from Japan, workers who come to Japan are showing Japan less respect because they point out if you're a Vietnamese or Chinese or whatever factory worker, they pay more money in Korea now than they do in Japan. Japan can't compete with other Asian countries like Taiwan and Korea, which have higher wages and higher standard of living now than Japan does, or at least by a lot of economic metrics. I think this is just a part of inevitably of Japan's demographic decline that this is going to happen. But certainly, when you look at that Japan not only, I mean, Japan should have realized years ago that it would be competing for foreign labor, which it desperately needs because its population is disappearing, and instead it set up the apprenticeship scheme, which has been so rife with unpoliced abuse by farmers and factory owners, treating taking the passports of the workers and not paying them, and basically treating them like indentured slaves. And I've been talking for years about the damage this is doing to Japan's reputation, and now all those chickens are coming home to roost. That those people now that the money's not even worth it anymore, so Japan has to compete on being a good place to live and work. And there you go. They're not, and Japan is failing at that. And so the response is now the government's decided, or at least advisors to the government are saying, yeah, let's get rid of that apprenticeship scheme because it's got such a bad reputation. Let's set up a new scheme that's going to be focused on competing and advertising for foreign talent to come to Japan, which is what the original scheme was supposed to be, but it turned into a slave worker scheme. And they're trying this again. I mean, I've been saying for years, and on the one hand, good, but this was the original plan and they didn't do it. I mean, if they really learn from all the things that were wrong with this, which I find they could have just fixed the existing scheme all of this time. The Ministry of Justice was never interested in doing so. And can Japan pivot and adapt to this? I've doubted Japan's ability to attract tourists and to do other things that it surprised me and shown me that it could. But is Japan really able to set up a new foreign worker appeal talent acquisition scheme and actually be successful? I can't really imagine that. Well, I hope so. I hope so. This is what they're supposed to have done all along. But it might be too late. If they had done this back before, when Japan had higher wages and knew that the situation was coming, that it would be less affordable than less worth it for foreign workers, and developed a good reputation, it might still be competitive. That okay, you don't earn as much money as in Korea, but it's a nicer place to live and work. But it's not even that, right? It's a place that abuses workers, as badly as anywhere else, and it doesn't pay as much. And I don't know if they can remedy that. And honestly, and even if they realize that that's the problem, how do they change the behavior of the farmers and the factory owners that are doing this? Because there's been no consequences for anyone doing this. The Ministry of Justice has only focused on the foreigners, runaway slaves, as criminals in this, not the people who are actually abusing their workers. So yeah, it's good to see that the news media and so on is now waking up to the reality that, oh, maybe they shouldn't have beaten their slaves so much, since the neighboring countries are actually giving them good paying jobs and not treating them like slaves, now that for some reason they don't want to come here anymore. This is what happens. But yeah. Coming back into the chat, Dan H, what would happen if Saitama Man would do this and why has yet to attempt to attack the PM? When you say Saitama Man, I'm thinking, who is Saitama Man? Who are you thinking of? Or do you mean just a random person from Saitama? I mean, I don't know if this guy... Oh, you mean Yamagami was from Saitama, right? In fact, I'm sorry, you've lost me. Saitama Man. I'm trying to think. Who is Saitama Man? I don't know. You mean the guy who robbed the 7-Eleven and apologized immediately when they said they didn't have any money? I imagine that assassination attempt would probably end peacefully and rapidly. Don't know. Thomas Rock, Black Kigyo rocks now. No, it does not. Black Kigyo do not rock. But yeah, especially, it's one thing to abuse Japanese people who are conditioned to accept worker abuse, which even in those circumstances, and I've worked in companies like that, It's even then, it changes over time. But the fact doing that to foreign workers, thinking that they'll just accept it, is yeah, yeah. I mean, again, this is maybe why Japan needs robots because they don't know how to treat people. Who knows? Yeah, it's a take on Florida Man. I think you're right. When Saitama Man decides to attack the PM, well, I mean, honestly, I think that when you see how close these randos are getting to being able to do this sort of thing and get famous, I do think this is probably going to be the end of the kind of political campaigning. I mean, the upside is, oh, I should have shared. There was another story which I saw on Twitter today, which again I can't share because Elon turned off all the feeds. In the local elections in Minato Ward in Tokyo, which is where Roppongi is, but also the fancy Azabujuban and the fancy sort of expat neighborhoods. Apparently, you know how they have the sound trucks that drive through the neighborhoods making really loud noise campaigning for different political campaigns. And it's really, really annoying. Apparently, a DJ, what was her name? It was DJ Tiara. It's a female DJ, EDM DJ, who's called DJ Tiara. And apparently she got like a sound van, like literally like the political campaigning sound van. And when she got up to her stump speech in front of the train station, she just got out like a deck and started DJing like trance music really loud. And I saw that. I thought that was wonderful because honestly, I would rather listen to EDM if we're being forced. Like the fact that you're not allowed to play sound pollution, you get in trouble for for loud music. But there seems to be no noise limits on annoying political campaigning in Japan. So I thought it was a really brilliant hack that this DJ decided to just hook up her sound system to a political campaigning truck and stump speech and just play really loud techno music. I thought that was good. Yeah. I hope she wins. I don't know. I'd vote. I mean, it's as much. I can't vote anyway, right? So I can say I'd vote for her. But yeah, I don't know if she was just doing that as a stunt to promote herself. I do hope, so long as she's not seriously campaigning actually as a politician, I think it was wonderful. Just another random thing. I guess the folks at Unseen Japan thought it would be good to give a complete guide to eating high protein like diet food and exercise food at convenience stores. Where I am in Japan, I'm closer to Family Marts, but I do like 7-Eleven as well. That's pretty true. I mean, you can actually get really, really healthy food, and you can. I mean, I don't think that a butter pancake is necessarily the best. In fact, I just realized the caption, is this healthy? No. But will you feel good after eating it? Also no. Then why are they showing this? But the point is they do have, you can actually get straight up veggies, straight up meat. You can actually do a proper protein. You can put together relatively healthy food even from convenience stores. Although if you really want to do that, you should go to a supermarket. It'll be cheaper than the convenience store and fresher and healthier, not processed. But yeah, you can totally do that. Thought that was interesting. Comments, dan 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 da Saitama. Yes, that is the song, indeed. Yeah, Ben Duncan will run for office just so you can play guitar. Why not? Seriously, I mean, honestly, I'd rather at least you'll probably get people who actually don't mind listening to you at least. After a month since masking was left to personal freedom and judgment in Tokyo, apparently, again, I haven't been there, of course, most people are still wearing masks. They're showing. So it's dropped from 89.7% to 85.6%. So like 3% basically it's dropped. Well, actually, no, more than that, 4% it's dropped. But not very much. And people are asking why. When I posted this, there's a lot of reaction on Twitter, and the general response was, well, it's hay fever season. So normally, even without the pandemic, this time of year, maybe not 90% of people, maybe not 85% of people, but you get a pretty high percentage of people normally this time of year wearing masks anyway. So that is the first thing. Plus, I do think you've just got a lot of people, like young people and so on as well, who are conditioned to doing it as manners and consideration and not wanting to be seen as that person not wearing a mask. So it hasn't really moved the needle very much, and I think that the conformity aspect of Japanese culture is really big. I mean, it's why you can be in Tokyo on a crowded train and you can hear a pin drop. It's so quiet, nobody talks. And they don't talk because no one else talks. It's like group enforced. And it's funny when you go to a place like Osaka, it really stands out to me how trains are bustling. They're noisy. People talk to each other, and it's kind of nice. So I think there's partly a Tokyo-specific thing around this as well. But there again, Osaka culture always is that it's okay to talk. So perhaps even that is still groupthink. But certainly in Tokyo, I think. But it's weirder because people don't know each other as well in Tokyo. But again, maybe that's it. So they don't even. There's no way to say that it's okay because they're not looking at each other. So everyone just stays out of caution on that. But yeah. Thomas Morris, LDP deserves a raise. It's been at least 6 months since the last one, or at least since the last leader, indeed. Mr. Cordychep, good to see you, by the way. But yeah, the rules apparently don't apply to politicians as decided by politicians. Who'd have thought? Well, it's good to be king. This was the car that I drove. It was really cool. Actually, I generally associate the Teslas with like the white leather interior, but this was all black, everything. Black wheels, black interior. And it was so much fun. It's hard to describe. I mean, like when you take off, there's no conscious, it feels like the car is off and it just moves forward in the beginning. It is really noisy on the highway, mainly because the car like isn't very soundproof. So you hear the road and you hear the wind, and it's as much noise as you'd expect. I think in a regular car on the highway, it doesn't feel silent. But it feels like you're on a kind of a go-kart, basically. You get on the highway and you floor it and it just leaps, it just catapults ahead of the traffic. So yeah, it was this is a lot of fun. I think I captioned this midlife crisis automotive bucket list item check, which it was. And I want to drive some more of these as well while I'm here. I mean, again, I don't get to drive very often in Japan, and America's a good place for driving. Everything's far apart. So yeah. The final story that I've got tonight is, I've already talked about ChatGPT. So story here, just again, IT story, just Fujitsu's getting out of the mainframe business, which is funny because they're the number one mainframe producer in the world. The thing is, mainframes are basically 1980s and earlier technology. There are some companies and some government agencies and so on that still want to do heavy duty computing on their own, and they don't want to use modern systems. They don't want to use a standard OS. They want custom operating system. They don't want to be connected to the internet. And for those companies, Fujitsu's been the go-to place, but the number of units being sold has been collapsing to the point that they're getting out of this. Yet their whole business has been focused on supporting, a 30-year out-of-date technology. I mean, they're literally supporting, basically, Sega Genesis 1 systems. Or in fact, even older technology than that for so long. And it's actually held up. There are a lot of companies that do that, but now it just doesn't make cost sense or security sense, or, and it's inflexible. And the people who know how to build them and run them and operate them are mostly old people. So there just isn't the workforce to support them anymore. So this is, in a way, Japan's kind of a victim of its success. It was so good at making these mainframes and held on to them for so long that now they've fallen desperately behind on digital transformation. That's what DX stands for in Japan, is digital transformation. And right now that the government and most companies are dropping it and moving into more efficient, more secure sort of cloud and modern IT technology, all these Japanese companies that have just had their business on, mañana, we'll take care of it. We don't have to worry about it today. We'll just we're making money. We're good. We'll worry about those problems later. For like, we're taking that attitude for 30 years. All of a sudden they've realized now they're screwed because they haven't been keeping up. I do hope that Fujitsu pivots and modernizes, because frankly they've been holding back Japan, and in the industry that I work in, it's very frustrating dealing with that. This is a case where, there are merits to mainframe technology in certain cases, but those cases are getting smaller and smaller. And it's a bit like fax machines. There are merits to fax machines, but I would say there's a high percentage of cases where fax machines are still being required in Japan, where email is more efficient. And they haven't switched over for those. So, the mocking of fax machines, I think, is justified. And I think that mainframes are the IT equivalent of fax machines. And yeah, Fujitsu has just been all in on fax machines for like 30 years after they really stopped making sense. And this is a big problem of Japan. But in a way, it's good to see that they're getting out of that. And that is all the topics I have for tonight. We are over time. One thing I do miss, I must admit, is right now I don't have a good way I can share YouTube videos that I've been watching, because they don't get picked up. Again, the Mastodon integration is not great. I feel like going through, I have seen some really great videos lately. The video that Aaron recommended last week on the history of Japan by Voices of the Past, long but worth it, really should go and watch. I did enjoy the recommendations of Day and Age, the Saturday after dinner things. Again, you have to subtitled, but it's actually two really interesting conversations. I really enjoyed the history of Lebanon in the 70s. It does have globally relevant things. Pretty much, all the best terrorism movies are about the topics that were happening at that time. But yeah, just quickly looking at my watch history. Oh, The Mandalorian is great. One more episode to go, but I'm really, really enjoying that. This week, I must admit, I did have on my bucket list that I'd like to watch a rocket launch when I'm in America. It turns out the granddaddy of them, although possibly something like a 5 kiloton nuclear bomb if it explodes, which could totally happen. It looks like the first SpaceX rocket, Starship, with the Starship booster, the first orbital test, could be as soon as tomorrow or day after tomorrow. That'd be crazy. Um, yeah, I was fully confident in the success of the mission until I heard that they decided to power it with an AI system run by Twitter. No, I don't think they're going to do that. Although the stories that Elon's looking at developing an AI system trained on Twitter. I mean, does anyone think that's a good idea? I don't understand how that could be a good idea. But very, very cool news coming up this week in terms of space stuff. Anyway, I won't get to watch it, but I must admit that'd be a hell of a thing to watch. I think it would be the biggest rocket in history, possibly other than the Russian N5, which had a terrible explosion and failure way back in the 60s or 70s. But yeah, other big videos to watch. I mean, there's just a ton of stuff at the moment. But in terms of Japan, really just the voices of the past thing. I hope everyone is well and having a good week. Do remember to like if you like. I really do appreciate it when people do that. I've got new running shoes coming in. They're supposed to be here today, but they didn't arrive. So I'm going to go for a run in those and post some times on those. But yeah. I mean, Mr. Cordy Champ, not only would the rocket have a meltdown at the launch pad, it would probably just spitefully start attacking. Who knows what it would do? It would be, I couldn't imagine any way in which that would be good. So you can drive my car anytime because it's an 82 Corolla. 82 Corollas are good cars. I would happily drive that. In fact, my ex in New Zealand had a Toyota 1186, which is the same as the GT86, and it was a fun car to drive. I mean, that was a Corolla basically, but it was set low to the road. So thank you for the offer. If I'm ever in Philadelphia, I will take you up on that. Everybody, have a good week. Do take care of yourselves. Don't get the Rona. Take your shots. All that good stuff. Remember, you can follow me on Twitter or Mastodon. And remember to like the video. I do appreciate it. Great. Thanks to everybody for joining me. Have a good week. I'll see you later. Boom. Peace. See you later. Ending stream. There's the big red button there. End stream. Yeah, glad you can make it, Ben. And thanks to everybody else who joined, including Tikyo Sam. Good to see you. See you later. Boom. Ending stream.